Forget the gold. Forget the legends. Being a pirate in 1715 wasn't a choice. It was a slow, salt-crusted sentence. Tonight, you are not watching a story, you are breathing it. The stench of rotting timber, the phantom ache of a lost limb, and the terrifying silence of the Caribbean mist. Before the waves swallow your memories, let yourself drift into the cold, hard truth of the wooden world. Close your eyes. Feel the weight of the air first. It's not the crisp, cool breeze of the mountains, but the heavy, salt-laden humidity of the West Indies. It's late, the kind of late where the world feels like it's held its breath, suspended between the dark ocean and a sky that has forgotten the sun. You are standing on the wooden deck of a merchant brig, the Antelope. Beneath your boots, the oak is smooth, worn down by years of relentless salt water and the rhythmic, weary scrubbing of a crew that hasn't seen dry land in 40 days. Listen to the ship. It's a living thing, a giant of wood and hemp, groaning in the dark. The mainmast emits a long, low protest as it leans into the wind, a deep, wooden creak that vibrates through the soles of your feet. The rigging hums a ghostly, low-frequency vibration that you feel in your chest more than you hear in your ears. It is a lullaby for the exhausted, a mechanical song of tension and release. You've been on the dog watch for 4 hours, and the horizon is no longer a line, but a smudge of charcoal blending into a deep ink-blue void. The mist is rolling in now. It doesn't come with a roar. It creeps. It's a pale, ghostly veil that clings to the surface of the black water, slowly swallowing the reflections of the stars one by one until there is nothing left but you in the fog. It smells of damp wool, old rope, and the faint metallic tang of the coming tide. You lean against the rail, the dampness settling on your skin like a cold sweat. Everything is muffled. The world has gone soft at the edges, losing its sharp corners, losing its danger, or so it seems. Your mind wanders. You think about home, a place of solid ground, of stone hearths and chimneys that do not sway. You remember the smell of baking bread and the feeling of a bed that stays still. But those are ghost stories now, fading memories that have no place on the Antelope. Here, your only reality is the slow, hypnotic tilt of the deck. Left, touch, then right. A cradling motion that tries to pull your eyelids down, heavier and heavier with every swell. The sea is a vast, dark velvet blanket, and for a moment, just a moment, you feel a strange, dangerous sense of peace. You are small. You are a speck on a nameless ocean, and the ocean doesn't care about your debts, your sins, or your tired, aching bones. But in the golden age of piracy, silence is never a gift. It is a shroud. You notice the air has grown colder. The rhythm of the waves hasn't changed, but the atmosphere has thickened. The mist ahead isn't just gray anymore. It has a density, a weight that shouldn't be there. Out of the corner of your eye, a silhouette begins to take shape. It is darker than the night, silent as a predator cutting through a midnight lagoon. No lanterns. No signals. No friendly hail from a fellow merchant. It's a jagged outline of torn canvas and blackened timber, drifting toward you like a bad memory you thought you'd buried. Your heart gives a single, heavy thud against your ribs, a dull boom that echoes the sound of the waves. The peace you felt a moment ago is gone, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity that cuts through your exhaustion. Your throat is dry, coated in salt and fear. The ship in the mist moves with an unnatural grace, its hull slicing the water without a sound. It is built for the hunt, low, lean, and terrifyingly fast. You can see the jagged teeth of the gun ports now, closed but ready. The mist parts for it, swirling in its wake, revealing the tattered black sails that look like the wings of a fallen angel. You want to scream, to wake the crew, to break this suffocating silence. But your voice is trapped. You realize that the rhythm of your life, the steady, boring, safe rhythm of a simple sailor, has just been severed. The shadow is here, and as the first grappling hook, cold and iron-hard, bites into the wood of the antelope with a sickening thud, you realize the nightmare isn't beginning. You are already inside it. And now, as the mist turns from gray to the color of gunpowder, you must decide if you want to die a merchant, or live as something the world fears. The shadow does not announce itself with a roar. It is a slow, methodical erasure of the horizon, a creeping stain against the charcoal sky. You stand frozen on the deck of the Antelope, your hand still gripping the cold, salt-crusted railing until your knuckles turn as white as the sea spray. The mist, which only moments ago felt like a protective veil, now feels like a tightening shroud. It clings to your eyelashes, heavy and gray, blurring the line between the water and the heavens until the entire universe feels no larger than the few feet of weathered timber beneath your boots. There, a movement. A jagged, unnatural tear in the fog that shouldn't be there. The stranger ship slides into view, and it is not a creature of grace or majesty. It is a scavenger of the deep, a predator built from the wreckage of 1,000 storms. Its hull is stained the dark, bruised color of dried blood and charred oak, scarred by the bites of grapeshot and the relentless gnawing of shipworms. The sails are not the proud, bleached canvas of a Royal Navy vessel. They are tattered, soot-blackened sheets that hang from the yards like the skin of a sun-bleached skeleton. There is no music here, no rhythmic shanties, no heroic shouting of orders. There is only the sound of the hull slicing the water, a wet, tearing noise, like a rusted blade cutting through heavy silk. You realize, with a sickening jolt, that they are not using lanterns. They are sailing by the cold light of the stars and the grim intuition of the damned. As the distance closes, the sheer suffocating scale of the predator becomes clear. It looms over the Antelope, cutting off the wind and stealing the very air from your sails. Your own ship begins to wallow, losing its momentum, trapped in the massive, suffocating shadow of the intruder. Look at the rigging. It is cluttered with things that have no place on a peaceful merchant ship. Heavy grappling hooks hang like iron talons from the yardarms, swaying with a rhythmic metallic clink. Coils of thick, taut rope sit ready on the deck, looking like sleeping black serpents. And then, there are the men. They are not sailors anymore. They are ghosts who simply refuse to die. You see them lining the rail, motionless silhouettes against the shifting gray fog. They do not wear uniforms. They wear a chaotic collage of stolen finery and salt-rotted rags, a silk waistcoat stained with galley grease, a leather belt heavy with rusted steel, a headscarf damp with the spray of 1,000 leagues. They do not look at you with anger or even hatred. They look at you with the hollow, starving gaze of men who have forgotten the taste of fresh water and the warmth of a steady, land-bound hearth. The silence is so absolute that you can hear the stray droplets of water falling from their idle oars. It is the rhythmic countdown to the end of your life as you know it. Your captain, a man whose voice usually booms like a brass drum, is standing near the wheel. You see his silhouette tremble in the pale light. He knows. Every merchant sailor knows the reputation of a ship that sails without a flag and without a soul. He reaches for his pistol, his fingers fumbling with the flintlock, but the motion is slow and heavy, as if he is moving through chest-deep water. Then, a voice cuts through the fog. It is not a scream. It is a low, conversational growl that carries across the narrow gap between the hulls with terrifying clarity. Strike your colors, little bird, or let the salt finish what the wind started. The words are cold. They have no mercy, but they have no malice either. It is the voice of a man stating an inevitable law of nature. The predator has found the prey, and the outcome is already written in the stars. Suddenly, the silence shatters. A single swivel gun on the pirate ship flashes a brief, blinding burst of orange in the gray. The sound is a sharp, violent crack that echoes off the surface of the flat water. A second later, a spray of oak splinters erupts from the Antelope's mainmast. You feel the vibration in your teeth. The smell hits you instantly: sulfur, burnt charcoal, and the acrid metallic tang of ozone. It is the smell of the end. You do not fight. Your legs feel like lead, rooted to the deck by the sheer weight of the moment. You watch as the grappling hooks are thrown. They fly through the air like iron birds of prey, their long hempen tails trailing behind them. The first one bites into the railing just feet from your hand. The iron groans as it sinks deep into the wood. Another one catches the shrouds with a sickening snap. Puck! The ships groan as they are pulled together, a violent mating dance of wood and iron. The Antelope tilts, its side pressing against the predator's hull with a grinding roar that sounds like a mountain crumbling into the sea. The gap closes. The mist is pushed away by the sheer heat of the tension. And then they leap. They do not come with a cheer. They come with a collective, guttural breath, a sound of shared hunger. The first man to hit your deck is small, wiry, with eyes that reflect absolutely nothing. He lands silently, a cutlass held between his teeth, his bare feet gripping the wet wood like claws. Behind him comes a flood of shadows, a wave of human wreckage spilling over. The rail. You drop your knife. It clatters on the deck, a small, tinny sound that is instantly lost in the rising chaos. You raise your hands, not out of bravery, but because your body has recognized a truth your mind is still trying to process. The world of law, of cargo, of wages, and of home has vanished into the mist. You are standing on the edge of a jagged, lawless hole in the map. And as a heavy, calloused hand finally grips your shoulder, smelling of old tobacco and cold blood, you realize the shadow on the horizon didn't just find your ship. It found you. The rhythm of the merchant brig is gone, replaced by the frantic, uneven heartbeat of a ship that no longer belongs to any king. The darkness is no longer outside. It is on the deck, breathing right next to you. The transition from a merchant sailor to a captive of the Black Flag happens in the narrow, suffocating space between two heartbeats. One moment, you are servant of the crown, a man with a documented name and a regulated wage. The next, you are nothing but ballast, a nameless soul caught in the gears of a much darker machine. You are forced onto your knees. The wooden deck of the Antelope, which you scrubbed with pride only yesterday, now feels alien and cold. It is slick with an unsettling mixture of seawater, spilled lamp oil, and the copper-scented residue of the brief, violent struggle. Around you, the air is thick with the scent of unwashed bodies and the acrid, stinging ghost of gunpowder. You keep your eyes fixed on a single, jagged splinter in the deck. But you can feel them. The pirates move around you like wolves, circling a fallen stag. They don't shout. They don't celebrate with the wild abandon of the stories. They move with a terrifying, silent efficiency, stripping the ship of its dignity and its cargo. A pair of boots stops directly in front of you. They are made of expensive, stolen leather, but they are cracked and salt-stained, the silver buckles tarnished to a dull, leaden gray. You look up, slowly, dreading what you might see. The man standing over you is a mountain of scarred flesh and sun-bleached linen. His skin is the color of old teak wood, etched with the jagged maps of 100 boarding actions. He doesn't look at you with hatred. He looks at you with the cold, clinical appraisal of a butcher deciding which parts of a carcass are worth the salt. This is the quartermaster, the man who holds the scales of life and death on a pirate vessel. Can you hand, reef, and steer? His voice is a low, rhythmic rumble, like stones grinding together at the bottom of a deep well. You nod, your throat too tight to produce a sound. You've spent 7 long years on the high seas. You know every knot, every sail, and every unpredictable mood of the Atlantic. You are a sailor to your very marrow. Good, he says, and for a fleeting second, you think you see a flicker of something resembling recognition in his eyes. Because the sea doesn't care for passengers. You work, or you drift. There is no middle ground under this flag. He reaches down and grabs the collar of your salt-crusted tunic, hauling you to your feet with an effortless, jarring strength that nearly dislocates your shoulder. He shoves a heavy wooden bucket into your hands. It is filled with a coarse mixture of sand, vinegar, and lye. Scrub, he commands, pointing toward the dark stains near the mast. Start with the blood. If the deck isn't white by the time the moon reaches its peak, you'll find out exactly how cold the deep really is. You begin to move, your muscles acting on a primal instinct for survival. The rhythm of the scrubbing, becomes your only anchor in a world that has gone mad. It is a mindless, grueling task, but it saves you from the paralyzing grip of terror. As you work, you watch the symbolic execution of your former life. The Antelope's flag, the proud red ensign of the merchant fleet, is hacked down with a rusted cutlass and tossed into the churning wake like a piece of refuse. In its place, a void of black canvas is hoisted to the masthead, snapping hungrily in the wind. You see your fellow sailors being sorted. Some are weeping openly, their faces pressed into the damp wood. Others, the younger ones, look at the pirates with a dark, dangerous hunger in their eyes. You realize then that the line between a law-abiding merchant and a desperate murderer is thinner than a sheet of parchment. It is simply a matter of who is holding the steel and who is pleading for their life. The sun begins to dip below the horizon, turning the lingering mist into a bruised, ominous purple. The pirates begin to haul the cargo from your hold: barrels of molasses, crates of fine English cloth, and casks of salt beef. They work with a frantic, desperate energy, as if they are trying to outrun the very air they breathe. You feel a heavy hand on your shoulder again. It isn't the quartermaster this time. It is a boy, perhaps no older than 16, with a jagged, poorly healed scar running from his ear to his chin. He hands you a battered tin cup. The liquid inside is dark and viscous, smelling of fermented sugar and copper. Drink, he whispers, his voice surprisingly soft. It makes the world stop shaking for a little while. You take a sip. The raw rum burns like a lit torch going down your throat, settling in your stomach with a heavy, numbing heat. For the first time since that black shadow appeared on the horizon, your hands stop trembling. You lean against the cold railing, watching the first stars blink through the rigging. You are no longer a merchant sailor. You are a ghost in waiting, a single cell in the brotherhood of the damned. You are part of the soot, part of the salt, and part of the shadow. And as the last light of the day vanishes, leaving only the glowing embers of the pirates' pipes, you realize the most terrifying thing of all: the deck is finally clean, but your soul is stained forever. The quartermaster shoves you toward a narrow hatch, and as you descend the splintered ladder, the world of salt spray and starlight vanishes. You are entering the orlop deck, the very belly of the ship, a place where the sun is a forgotten myth. It is a realm of perpetual twilight, lit only by a single swaying lantern that casts long, sickly yellow shadows against the weeping oak of the hull. The smell hits you like a physical blow. It is a thick, stagnant soup of unwashed bodies, rotting ballast water, and the sharp vinegary tang of cheap wine spilled long ago. There are no hammocks here for the new blood, no soft linens or quiet corners. You find a narrow space on the bare planks, wedged between a massive coil of tarred rope and a man who is snoring with a wet, rattling sound deep in his chest. You lie down, but the wood beneath you is never still. The ship is a living, groaning creature, and down here, you can feel its every ache. You can hear the massive pressure of the Atlantic pressing against the hull planks just inches from your head. The timber moans under the strain, a deep, complaining shriek that never truly stops. It is the sound of 10,000 tons of black water trying to find a way in, reminding you that only a few inches of oak stand between you and the abyss. Around you, the darkness is alive. You hear the rustle of dry straw and the frantic tiny footsteps of rats navigating the shadows. They are the true masters of this hold, scurrying over crates and sleeping limbs with a terrifying lack of fear. You close your eyes and try to summon the image of a dry bed on solid ground, a place where the floor doesn't tilt, but the rhythm of the ship pulls you back. Tilt. Heave. Dot. No see. See das vernichtet ihr nicht, Undertale. Tilt. Heave detten. Hunts. Gas denigi. Settle. Gas. The motion is violent down here, an unpredictable lurch that tosses your exhausted body against the hard, cold wood. Your stomach turns, a knot of seasickness rising in your throat as the air grows thinner and warmer. You swallow hard, tasting the lingering copper of the rum and the salt of your own sweat. You are breathing the same air as 100 other desperate men. A humid mist of breath and decay. In the far corner of the hold, a veteran pirate is sharpening a blade. The rhythmic hiss of the whetstone against steel is steady, a mechanical prayer in the gloom. It is a reminder that in this world, you do not sleep to rest. You sleep to survive the sheer exhaustion of the hunt. Every sound is magnified, the clink of a chain, the splash of bilge water, the heavy sigh of a man dreaming of a home he will never see again. A drop of water hits your forehead, then another. The deck above is leaking, a mixture of seawater and the filth from the evening scrub. You don't move to wipe it away. You are too tired, too hollowed out by the day's terror to care. You let the cold, salt-heavy water track a path down your temple, a silent baptism into a life of shadows. As the hours crawl by, the terrifying groans of the ship begin to change. They stop being noises and start being a language. The rhythmic thumping of the waves against the bow becomes a pulse, matching the slow thud of your own heart. You stop fighting the wood. You let your muscles go slack, allowing your body to become a piece of the ship's own skeleton. You are no longer a man lying on a floor. You are a splinter of the vessel itself, drifting through a void of salt and silence. The darkness finally wins. It heavy and thick, pressing down on your eyelids like coins. You don't fall asleep so much as you sink, drifting down into a deep, dreamless state, where the only thing that exists is the tilt of the hull and the endless, ancient song of the sea. The morning on a pirate ship does not begin with the smell of coffee or the comfort of a warm hearth. It begins with the heavy, metallic clanging of a crowbar against a hollow cask, a sound that vibrates through your skull and forces your eyes open to the dim, gray light filtering through the deck grates. Your body is a map of new aches, your muscles stiff from the cold oak floor, but the hunger in your stomach is louder than the pain. You are ushered toward the galley, a cramped, soot-stained corner of the ship, where the air is a thick fog of wood smoke and the briny steam of boiling seawater. The cook, a man with fingers missing from frostbite and a face permanently etched with the grease of 1,000 failed meals, slaps a wooden bowl into your hands. It contains your portion, a gray, lukewarm slurry, and a handful of ship's biscuits that feel more like sun-baked clay than bread. You sit on a crate, watching the biscuit in your hand. This is the infamous hardtack. You don't bite it, not if you want to keep your teeth. You've seen men break their jaws on these stones of flour and salt. Instead, you tap the edge of the biscuit against the rim of your bowl. Tap, pataton. Tap, but, tap. Tap, tot, tot. You wait for the movement. And then you see them. Small, black-headed weevils begin to crawl out of the air holes, fleeing the vibration. You flick them away with a practiced indifference that would have horrified the man you were just a week ago. You soak the rock-hard bread in the slurry, which you realize is a salmagundi, a desperate mix of salted beef, palm oil, and whatever onions haven't rotted into slime. The meat is stringy, tough as old leather, and so heavily salted that it stings the small cuts on your lips. It tastes of the ocean, of sweat, and of a long-dead cow that has spent months in a humid hole. But as the warmth hits your stomach, you feel a primal surge of energy. In this world, flavor is a luxury. Calories are a weapon. Around you, the other men eat in a strange, focused silence. There is no polite conversation here, only the sound of wooden spoons scraping against bowls and the wet, heavy chewing of men who don't know when their next meal will be. You notice the man across from you, his eyes darting toward your bowl, calculating. You instinctively pull your meal closer to your chest, your shoulders hunching. The ship is teaching you its first lesson. What is yours is only yours, as long as you can guard it. The cook tosses a handful of shriveled blackened objects into a communal pot. Ims, onion, contains. They are bitter, dry, and taste like medicine, but the quartermaster watches every man swallow his share. You've seen the landlubbers rot, the scurvy that turns gums to black sponge and reopens old wounds, and you realize that these bitter fruits are the only thing keeping your body from falling apart in the middle of the Atlantic. As you finish the last of the salty broth, your throat feels parched, crying out for water. You are led to the scuttlebutt, a large wooden cask of drinking water. But the water inside is not clear. It is a dull, stagnant green, covered in a thin film of slime. It smells of the River Thames, of old rain, and of the moss growing in the dark corners of the hold. You hold your breath and drink. It is warm, thick, and tastes of wood rot, but it wets your parched tongue. You lean back against a mast, the rough bark of the hemp rope pressing into your spine. The salt from the meal is already crusting on your skin, itchy and sharp. You watch the sun climb higher, burning through the last of the morning mist, turning the sea into a sheet of hammered silver that hurts your eyes. Your stomach is full, but it is an uneasy fullness, a heavy weight that reminds you of your mortality. This is the fuel of the golden age. Not fine wines or roasted meats, but the grit of sand in your teeth and the sour tang of survival. You look at the empty bowl in your hands, realizing that every bite you take is a debt to the ship, a promise that you will give your blood and your sweat in exchange for another day of breathing. The sea provides nothing for free, and today you have paid for your life with a handful of maggot-flecked flour and the bitter juice of a dying lime. The rhythm of the ship begins to pick up. The boatswain's whistle cuts through the air, sharp and demanding. The meal is over. The work begins. And as you stand up, your legs feeling like lead, you realize that the hunger never truly goes away. It just hides beneath the surface, waiting for the next time the shadows on the horizon grow long. The taste of salt lingers on your tongue, a permanent reminder of where you are. You are a predator now, but a predator that is always, always starving. The survival of a pirate is not measured by the gold in his pocket, but by the resilience of his flesh. On the ship, there is no surgeon with a degree from London or Paris. There is only Gristle, the ship's cook, or perhaps a carpenter, whose medical kit consists of a rusted saw, a leather strap, and a bottle of high-proof rum that smells more like industrial solvent than a drink. When the fever takes hold, or a splinter the size of a dagger finds its way into your thigh, you don't pray for a miracle. You pray for a quick hand and a clean faint. You find yourself sitting on a blood-stained sea chest in the dim light of the steerage. The air here is stagnant, heavy with the scent of vinegar and burnt iron. Gristle stands before you, his sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms corded with muscle and stained with the remnants of the morning's butchery. He doesn't offer words of comfort. He simply hands you a piece of thick, salt-cured leather, scarred by the teeth of the men who sat where you are sitting now. Bite, he grunts. You place the leather between your back teeth. the taste of old sweat and copper filling your mouth. You look away, focusing on the rhythmic swaying of a lantern, trying to detach your mind from the physical reality of your own nerves. Gristle reaches into a bucket of boiling seawater and pulls out a pair of iron tongs. They are blackened by fire, glowing with a dull, malevolent heat at the tips. He isn't looking for a graceful solution. He is looking to excise the rot before it claims the ship. The first touch is not pain. It is a shock so profound that your vision turns white. The heat sears through the layers of your skin, a localized sun that demands every ounce of your consciousness. You bite down on the leather until your jaw aches, a muffled groan trapped in your throat. The ship tilts, a slow, mocking sway that makes the floor feel like it's slipping away. You can smell it now, the acrid, sickening scent of your own scorched hair and flesh. It is a smell that will haunt your dreams for years, a permanent marker of the day you traded your humanity for a chance to keep breathing. Gristle works with a brutal, mechanical speed. He digs, he pulls, and he sears. There is no anesthesia here, only the raw, guttering flame of your own will to live. You feel the iron teeth of the tongs clench deep within the wound, dragging out a jagged shard of oak that had begun to fester in the tropical heat. Every tug is a lightning strike along your spine. You feel the sweat pouring off your brow, stinging your eyes, but you cannot move. To flinch is to invite the blade. To scream is to waste the breath you need to stay conscious. When the metal finally leaves your skin, the relief is almost as violent as the pain. Gristle douses the wound in a cup of raw, stinging alcohol. It feels like liquid fire being poured into an open volcano. Your nerves scream in a final, desperate protest before they finally begin to go numb, exhausted by the sheer intensity of the assault. He wraps the wound in a strip of scorched linen, pulling the knot tight enough to stop the bleeding, regardless of the bruising it leaves behind. He nods once, a silent acknowledgement that you didn't break. He pours a measure of the same rum into a tin cup and pushes it toward you. You take it with hands that shake like dry leaves in a gale. The liquid is harsh, burning a path down your throat, but it brings a dull, heavy fog that begins to shroud the agony. The room stops spinning. The shadows on the wall stop dancing. You realize then that on this ship, the most terrifying thing isn't the enemy's cannon or the Navy's noose. It is the frailty of your own body. You are a collection of bone and muscle held together by luck and the rough stitches of a man who considers a saw his primary tool. You look down at the bandage, already turning a dull pink, and you feel a strange, hollow pride. You have looked into the white light of the abyss and refuse to blink. The rhythm of the ocean returns. The deep, thudding pulse of the waves against the hull, acting as a heartbeat for the wounded. You are carried back to your corner of the hold, your body feeling heavy, as if it were made of lead. The pain is still there, a throbbing, rhythmic reminder of your mortality. But it is distant now, muffled by the rum and the sheer weight of your exhaustion. In the Golden Age, healing is just another form of combat. And today, you have won. You close your eyes, the scent of burnt iron still clinging to your skin, and let the darkness take you once more. The ship groans in sympathy, a wooden cradle carrying its broken cargo through the endless, indifferent blue. The world you left behind was governed by kings, by bloodlines, and by judges who never felt the sting of salt on a broken blister. But here, on the edge of the known map, a different kind of order emerges from the chaos. It is not born of grace, but of necessity. You are summoned to the main deck as the moon reaches its zenith, casting a pale silver light over the assembled crew. They stand in a wide circle, a jagged ring of scarred faces and tired eyes. In the center, resting on an inverted rum crate, lies a single sheet of parchment, yellowed by tobacco smoke and stiff with dried brine. This is the code. The quartermaster steps forward, his voice dropping to a low, gravelly rasp that seems to vibrate against the wooden masts. He does not read the words. He recites them like a dark scripture. You realize that. For men who have been spat out by society, this document is the only thing keeping the ship from becoming a floating slaughterhouse. It is a social contract written in the shadow of the gallows. The first rule is the simplest. Every man has a vote in affairs of moment. It is a dizzying thought. In the Navy, you were a ghost, a numbered back to be lashed at a captain's whim. Here, your voice carries the same weight as the man who has spent 20 years at sea. You have a title to the fresh provisions and the strong liquors seized in the heat of the hunt. It is a radical, dangerous kind of equality. It suggests that even here, in this lawless void, a man's worth is measured by his contribution, not his birthright. The code dictates the rhythm of your nights. All lights and candles are to be put out by 8 o'clock. If any of the crew, after that hour, still remain inclined for drinking, they must do it on the open deck, under the watch of the stars. It is a rule born of the fear of a stray spark, turning this wooden world into a funeral pyre. You imagine the silence that follows the striking of the lanterns, the way the ship settles into a deep, breathing hush, broken only by the rhythmic slap of the waves against the hull. Then comes the grim mathematics of survival. The code lays out the price of your flesh. To lose a right arm is worth 600 pieces of 8. A left arm, 500. A leg is worth 400, and an eye, 100. It is a morbid ledger, a guarantee that if the sea takes a part of you, the Brotherhood will ensure you do not starve in the gutters of a port town. It is the only insurance you will ever own. You look at your hands, still whole and trembling slightly, and you wonder which part of you the Atlantic will claim first. Justice is swift and devoid of nuance. To desert your quarters in battle is death or marooning. To steal from a brother is to be slit in the ears and nose, and set ashore on a desolate quay, left to the mercy of the sun and the crabs. There are no prisons on a pirate ship. There is only the deck and the water. This harshness creates a strange, heavy sense of security. You know exactly where the line is drawn. You know that the man sleeping next to you is bound by the same iron, invisible threads. You are asked to step forward. The quartermaster hands you a cracked, leather-bound Bible, not out of piety, but because it is the most solemn object they possess. You lay your hand on the cold leather and swear your life to the ship, to the crew, and to the code. The words feel heavy in your mouth, a cold weight that settles in your chest. You are no longer an individual. You are a cell in a larger body, a single plank in a hull that must hold together or sink. As you retreat back into the shadows of the crew, you look up at the black flag snapping in the wind above. It is not a symbol of anarchy, but of a different kind of law, one that is fair because it is cruel, and stable because it is shared. You realize that for the first time in your life, you are not a servant. You are a shareholder in a desperate floating republic. The meeting disperses as silently as it began. The men melt back into the darkness of the hatches, their footsteps muffled by the damp wood. You lean against the mast, watching the moon slip behind a bank of clouds. The code remains on the crate for a moment longer, a pale ghost of a promise in the center of the deck, before the quartermaster rolls it up and tucks it away. The sea continues its endless, rhythmic swaying, indifferent to the laws of men. But as you find your way back to your cramped space in the hold, you feel a strange, hollow peace. You have a place. You have a price. And in this world of shifting winds and hidden reefs, that is more than most men can claim. You close your eyes, the image of the yellowed parchment burned into your mind, and let the ship carry you deeper into the night. On a pirate ship, you do not choose your family. The sea chooses them for you, dragging them from the gutters of London, the sugar plantations of Barbados, and the shattered wrecks of the Royal Navy. They are a collection of broken parts, held together by the gravity of the black flag. As you spend your days hauling tarred ropes and your nights listening to the rhythmic breathing of 100 desperate men, you begin to see past the scars and the terrifying reputations. You realize that every man on this deck is a refugee from a life that tried to crush him. There is Elias, a man whose skin is so deeply etched by the sun that he looks like he was carved from driftwood. He was once a master gunner for the king, a man of precision and duty, until a corrupt officer decided his pension was better spent on silk stockings and gin. Now, Elias treats the ship's cannons like his own children, whispering to the cold iron as he buffs away the salt. He doesn't speak of glory. He speaks of the trajectory of a ball, and the exact moment the wind will betray you. In the quiet hours of the middle watch, he shows you how to read the stars, not as gods, but as a map for those who have no home to return to. Then there is Brody, a giant of a man with a laugh that shakes the very timbers of the hull. He lost his left ear in a tavern brawl in Nassau, leaving a jagged ridge of scar tissue that he rubs when he's deep in thought. Brody was a blacksmith before the hunger took his village, and his hands, calloused and massive, can snap a thick hemp rope or cradle a wounded bird with the same startling ease. He is the one who teaches you the secret language of the ship, the difference between a groan of the hull that means a storm is coming, and a groan that means the wood is simply tired. You sit with them on the forecastle, the rhythmic swaying of the ship acting as a silent conductor to your shared exhaustion. You share a pipe, the smoke curling into the moonlight, smelling of cheap tobacco and dried seaweed. There is a strange, heavy comfort in their presence. These men don't ask about your past, your sins, or the name you left behind on the mainland. On this ship, you are judged only by the strength of your grip on a yardarm during a gale and the steadiness of your heart when the grapeshot begins to whistle. You will watch the way they interact, the unspoken signals, the way one man will shift his weight to balance another without a word being said. It is a brotherhood born of shared trauma and the knowledge that the world wants you all dead. They are the only people who understand the specific kind of cold that settles in your bones after a week of rain, or the way the silence of the ocean at 3 a.m. can make a man feel like the last living soul in existence. There is a girl among the crew, disguised in oversized breeches and a heavy wool coat, her hair shorn short and tucked under a salt-stained cap. No one speaks of it. In this world, gender is a luxury of the land. Here, if you can pull a rope and stay awake on watch, you are a brother. She moves with a wary cat-like grace, her eyes always scanning the horizon, looking for a freedom that doesn't involve a kitchen or a master. You see her sometimes, staring at the wake of the ship, her expression a mixture of fierce pride and a loneliness so deep it seems to swallow the light. This is your new world. It is a collection of fragments, men and women who were told they were nothing, now standing together as a force that makes empires tremble. You find yourself leaning into the rhythm of their lives. You learn their stories in snatches of conversation between the crashing of the waves. You learn that one man sails to pay for a daughter's medicine, while another sails because he killed a man who deserved it, and another sails simply because the land felt too small for his spirit. As the moon begins its slow descent, leaving the sea in a soft, silver glow, you realize that you are no longer afraid of them. They are not the monsters from the nursery rhymes. They are just men, tired and salt-burned, trying to carve a few more days of life out of an indifferent ocean. You close your eyes, the low murmur of their voices blending with the creaking of the masts, and for the first time, you feel a sense of belonging. You are a fragment among fragments, a brother among the damned, drifting together toward a horizon that promises nothing but more of the same. The ship carries you all, a wooden cradle for the unwanted, swaying in the dark, rhythmic pulse of the Caribbean night. The air changes long before the first drop of rain hits the deck. It becomes unnaturally still, a heavy, suffocating vacuum that seems to suck the very breath from your lungs. The Caribbean, usually a vibrant turquoise, turns the color of bruised iron, and the horizon vanishes behind a wall of flickering, electric violet. You feel it in your joints, a dull, aching pressure that tells you the ocean is about to reclaim its silence. On a pirate ship, a storm is not just weather, it is a reckoning. It is the moment where the wood, the rope, and the bone are tested against the infinite weight of the sky. The boatswain's whistle pierces the eerie quiet, a sharp, frantic cry that sends the crew scrambling into the rigging. You find yourself climbing, your bare feet gripping the wet hemp as you rise 60 feet above the churning water. The wind arrives with a physical force, a sudden howling wall of air that threatens to pluck you from the yardarm like a dry leaf. You fight the canvas, the heavy, salt-stiffened fabric whipping against your face with the force of a leather lash. Your fingers are numb, bleeding from the friction, but you do not let go. To fall now is to vanish into a white void of foam and fury where no fury. One will hear your scream. Then the sky breaks. It is not rain, as you know. It on land. It is a deluge, a solid weight of water that turns the deck into a river and the air into a drowning pool. Lightning tears through the darkness, illuminating the ship for a terrifying microsecond, a skeletal ghost of wood and rope, struggling against mountains of hull. Black water. The thunder follows instantly, a bone-shaking roar that drowns out the groaning of the masts. You lean into the mast, wrapping your arms around the timber, feeling the entire massive structure whip and bend like a reed. You can hear the stays snapping high-pitched, metallic reports like pistol shots as the tension reaches the breaking point. Below you, the ship is a chaos of motion. It doesn't just roll, it plunges. One moment you are staring into a valley of darkness, and the next you are looking up at a 60-foot wall of water crested with jagged white foam. The hull screams, a rhythmic, agonized shrieking of oak against oak as the ship twists in the grip of the swell. You feel the vibration of the rudder fighting the current, a deep, shuddering pulse that travels up through your boots and into your very soul. You are no longer a hunter or a rebel. You are a passenger on a splinter of wood, at the mercy of an ancient, indifferent god. The wind carries a terrifying sound, a low-frequency hum that vibrates in your chest, the sound of the gale playing the rigging like a monstrous harp. It is a song of destruction, a reminder that the black flag you sail under means nothing to the wind. You see Elias near the pumps, his face a mask of grim determination, as he and a dozen others fight the rising water in the hold. They move in a rhythmic, desperate trance, the clanking of the iron pumps a steady mechanical heartbeat against the roar of the gale. Hours pass, or perhaps lifetimes. Time loses its meaning when every second is a struggle to remain attached to the world. Your clothes are heavy, sodden rags that chafe your skin raw. Your eyes burn from the salt spray. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, the violence begins to ebb. The wind shifts from a scream to a weary moan. The lightning retreats into the distance, flickering like a dying candle behind the clouds. The waves, though still massive, lose their jagged, murderous edges, becoming long, rolling swells that cradle the battered ship rather than trying to crush it. You descend from the rigging, your muscles shaking so violently you can barely find the rungs of the ladder. You collapse onto the deck, which is covered in a slurry of seawater, sand, and shredded canvas. The ship is a wreck, the maintopmast is snapped, the railing is shattered, and the scent of ozone and wet wool is everywhere. But the Antelope is still afloat. The wood held. The ropes held. You held. Around you, the crew begins to emerge from the shadows, silent and ghost-like in the fading stormlight. There is no cheering, no celebration. There is only the quiet, rhythmic sound of men breathing, the sound of survival. You watch the first light of a pale, watery dawn touch the horizon, turning the gray world into a soft, shimmering silver. The ocean is calm again, a deceptive, beautiful mirror that hides the wreckage of the night beneath its surface. You lean your head against a salt-stained barrel, the rhythmic swaying of the ship, now a gentle, soothing motion. The danger has passed, leaving behind a hollow, crystalline peace. You are exhausted, beyond words, your mind drifting like the sea foam. But as you listen to the steady rhythmic lap of the water against the hull, you realize that you have earned another day of life. The storm didn't break you, it baptized you. You are part of the sea now, and the sea is part of you. The aftermath of the storm leaves the ship with a predator's clarity. On the pirate deck, there is no such thing as a peaceful rest. There is only the gathering of strength for the next strike. You are sitting on the forecastle, the rhythmic sharpening of a cutlass against a whetstone providing a steady metallic pulse to the morning. The horizon is no longer a source of fear, but a canvas of opportunity. You find yourself scanning the blue distance with a new kind of intensity, your eyes skipping over the whitecaps, looking for the telltale vertical line of a foreign mast. You are no longer the prey. You have become the hawk. The cry from the crow's nest is thin and sharp, cutting through the heavy, humid air like a blade. Sail ho! It is not a warning, it is an invitation. The atmosphere on the deck shifts instantly. The lethargy of the tropical heat vanishes, replaced by a cold, professional focus. There is no frantic shouting, no wasted movement. The men move to their stations with a practiced, rhythmic grace, their bare feet slapping against the salt-bleached oak. You take your place at the braces, feeling the familiar tension of the hemp rope against your calloused palms. You feel the ship lean as the helmsman brings her around, the hull slicing into the swell with a renewed purpose. The target is a Spanish galleon, a lumbering mountain of gold and hubris, sitting deep in the water. She is beautiful, her white sails billowing like clouds, but to the men around you, she is simply a collection of resources, food, medicine, and the coin that buys a few weeks of freedom in a lawless port. You watch, as the distance closes, the rhythmic thumping of your own heart matching the steady roll of the sea. You are closing the trap, using the wind like a sculptor uses a chisel, carving a path through the waves that will bring you alongside. Elias is at the forward long gun, his hands moving with a rhythmic, reverent touch as he primes the touch hole. He doesn't look at the enemy ship with anger. He looks at it with the cold calculation of an engineer. He is waiting for the exact moment when the Antelope rises on the crest of a swell, the moment when the deck is level and the aim is true. The silence during the chase is the loudest thing you have ever heard. It is a suffocating, heavy blanket of anticipation, broken only by the rhythmic creaking of the masts and the hiss of the wake. Then the order comes. Not a scream, but a sharp, downward chop of the quartermaster's hand. The long gun speaks, a thunderous, bone-shaking roar that punches the air from your lungs. You watch the iron ball skip across the water, a rhythmic sequence of splashes before it bites into the galleon's stern. Wood splinters fly into the air like dry straw. The hunt is no longer a silent pursuit. It is a violent, sensory assault. The smell of sulfur and burnt silk fills the air, thick and cloying. You are hauling on the lines now, your muscles burning, your breath coming in ragged, rhythmic gasps as you bring the ship into the killing zone. You see the faces of the men on the other deck now. They are terrified, paralyzed by the sight of the black flag and the ragged, scarred men who sail under it. You feel a strange, hollow distance from their fear. You remember being on that side of the railing, but that man is a ghost now, drowned in the storm or buried under the salt of the orlop deck. You are part of the machine now. You are part of the iron. The two ships draw closer, their shadows merging on the water. The rhythmic clinking of the grappling chains begins, a sound that signals the end of the chase and the beginning of the harvest. You reach for your own blade, the cold steel feeling heavy and honest in your hand. The galleon tries to turn, a desperate, sluggish maneuver, but it is too late. The Antelope is faster, leaner, and hungrier. You are the shadow that has finally caught the light. As the first grappling hook bites into the galleon's rail, you feel a sudden, crystalline stillness. The world narrows down to the span of a few feet of wooden planking. The hunt is over. The feeding begins. You don't feel like a hero, and you don't feel like a villain. You feel like a force of nature, as inevitable as the tide and as cold as the deep. You leap across the gap, your boots hitting the foreign deck with a dull, rhythmic thud, and as the smoke swallows the sun, you realize that you have finally learned how to survive in a world that wanted you dead. You are a pirate, and the sea is your counting house. The violence of the hunt leaves a silence that is just as heavy, but far more weary. As the captured galleon drifts as a hollowed shell behind you, the focus shifts back to the survival of your own wooden home. The Antelope is scarred. She is a predator that has bitten deep but taken her own share of wounds in the struggle. You find yourself knee-deep in the bilge water of the lower hold, the rhythmic clanging of hammers against iron spikes echoing through the ribs of the ship. There is no glory in this work, only the slow, methodical labor that stands between the crew and the crushing weight of the Atlantic. You run your hand over a fresh scar in the hull where a Spanish 6-pounder skipped across the oak. The wood is splintered, weeping sap and salt, a raw wound in the side of the beast. To fix it, you must become part of the ship's own immune system. You work with Brody, the giant blacksmith, whose movements are surprisingly rhythmic and delicate despite his size. He hands you a caulking iron and a bundle of oakum hemp fibers soaked in thick black pine tar. The smell is overwhelming, a pungent medicinal aroma that fills your lungs and sticks to your skin like a second layer of clothing. You drive the oakum into the seams between the planks, the rhythmic tink-tink of your mallet providing a heartbeat to the quiet afternoon. It is a meditative, exhausting process. You must pack the fibers tight enough to swell when they hit the water, creating a seal that can withstand the immense pressure of the deep. If you are lazy, the sea will find the flaw. If you are careless, the ship will slowly fill with the very element that sustains it. You feel the vibration of the mallet traveling up your arm, a steady pulse that numbs your shoulder and clears your mind of everything but the wood and the tar. Above you, the carpenters are busy with the masts. The topmast, snapped during the chase, is being lowered. Away, replaced by a spare spar lashed to the deck. You watch the rhythmic swaying of the block and tackle as the men haul on the lines, their voices low and synchronized. There are no shanties today, only the grunts of exertion and the steady mechanical creak of the pulleys. The ship is being rebuilt piece by piece, a patchwork quilt of stolen timber and salvaged rope. It is a reminder that a pirate ship is never truly finished. It is a constant, evolving struggle against decay. You move to the deck to help with the rigging. The hemp ropes are frayed, salt-burnt, and stiff. You spend hours sitting on a coil of cable, your fingers weaving strands of fiber back together in a rhythmic, intricate dance of knots and splices. Your skin is stained black with pitch, your fingernails cracked, but there's a strange satisfaction in the work. You are mending the nervous system of the ship, ensuring that when the next gale hits, the sails will answer the helm without hesitation. You look at your hands and realize they are no longer the soft hands of a merchant clerk. They are rough, scarred, and strong, the hands of a man who knows how to hold things together when the world tries to pull them apart. The heat of the tropical sun beats down on your back, a heavy golden weight that makes every movement feel slow and deliberate. You stop for a moment to watch the rhythmic swell of the ocean, the water a deep, hypnotic indigo. The sea is calm now, a deceptive peace that allows you the time to heal. You see the other men scattered across the deck, all engaged in the same silent, rhythmic labor. Some are stitching torn canvas with long bone needles. Others are greasing the swivel guns or scrubbing the bloodstains from the gunwales with sand and vinegar. There is a communal spirit in the work, a shared understanding that the ship is the only thing that matters. Under the black flag, the vessel is not just property. It is the physical manifestation of your collective freedom. To care for the wood is to care for each other. You return to your task, the rhythmic tink-tink-tink of your mallet resuming its place in the symphony of repairs. The ship groans as it settles into a long, rolling swell, a sound of weary contentment. As the sun begins to set, casting long amber shadows across the patched deck, you look up at the new spar rising toward the stars. The Antelope looks different, now more jagged, more utilitarian, a creature of necessity rather than beauty. But she is strong. She is whole again. You wipe the sweat and tar from your brow, feeling a deep, rhythmic ache in your bones that feels like a quiet victory. You have spent the day building your own sanctuary, one hammer blow at a time. And as the first stars appear through the web of the rigging, you realize that the ship is no longer just a vessel you were forced onto. It is the only place in the world where you truly know how to survive. The capture of the galleon has brought a transformation to the deck of the Antelope, but it is not the glorious triumph spoken of in the taverns of Tortuga. It is a heavy, shimmering burden. You sit on a coil of anchor cable, watching the rhythmic distribution of the hull. This is the moment every man on this ship dreamed of when they first stepped over the rail. Yet the reality of the gold is as cold and indifferent as the seawater that nearly claimed it. The crates are pried open, with the sharp, rhythmic crack of dry wood splintering. Inside, the wealth of an empire lies exposed to the harsh Caribbean sun. There are bars of silver cast in the dark mines of Potosi, still dull and dusty. There are silk bolts from the east that smell of cedar and distant spices, and there are the coins thousands of Spanish doubloons and pieces of 8, a golden tide that spills across the salt-stained deck. You watch as the quartermaster counts it out, his fingers moving in a steady, rhythmic cadence. 1 for the ship, 2 for the captain, 1 for every man of the crew. You take your share into your hands. The gold is heavy, much heavier than you imagined. It has a strange, oily texture, as if the sweat of the slaves who mined it and the blood of the soldiers who guarded it have seeped into the very grain of the metal. You rub a coin between your thumb and forefinger, feeling the raised profile of a king who would gladly see you swing from a gibbet. This disc of metal represents a lifetime of honest wages, a decade of safety, a house with a garden and a hearth. But here, in the middle of a vast blue emptiness, it buys you nothing. You cannot eat gold. You cannot use it to patch a hole in the hull or to heal a festering wound. Around you, the men react in different ways. Some are laughing, a frantic, rhythmic sound that carries a hint of madness, throwing coins into the air just to watch them catch the light. Others are silent, clutching their pouches to their chests with a desperate, fearful intensity, as if the wealth itself is a curse they must guard. You see Brody staring at a handful of jewels, his massive face unreadable. He knows, as you are beginning to learn, that gold on a pirate ship is a fleeting phantom. It is a promise of a future that most of the men on this deck will never live to see. The wealth brings a new kind of tension to the ship, a rhythmic pulse of greed and suspicion that wasn't there when you were all starving and desperate. Men watch each other's shadows. They sleep with their hands on their hilts, their dreams filled not with the peace of the sea, but with the fear of being robbed by their own brothers. You realize that the gold has changed the weight of the ship. It sits lower in the water, burdened by the vanity of a world you try to escape. You look over the railing at the endless horizon, the rhythmic swell of the ocean, a constant reminder of the true power in this world. The sea does not care for Spanish gold. It would swallow a chest of emeralds with the same casual indifference as it would swallow a dead sailor. You feel a strange, hollow sensation in your chest. You came here for freedom, and you thought gold was the key. But now you see that the gold is just another kind of chain. It ties you to the land, to the ports, and to the very authorities who hunt you. As the sun begins to set, turning the sky into a bruised purple and gold that mocks the treasure on the deck, you drop your share into a small canvas bag. The clink of the coins is a rhythmic, hollow sound. You tuck it away in the corner of your sea chest, buried under your spare tunic and a handful of dry hardtack. You don't feel rich. You feel tired. You feel the weight of the lives that were traded for these metal discs, and the weight of the life you are currently risking to keep them. The rhythm of the ship continues, the masts creaking under the weight of the wind, the waves slapping against the bow. The gold is just cargo now, no different from the salt beef or the barrels of rum. You realize that the only true wealth you possess is the air in your lungs and the strength in your arms. You lean back against the mast, closing your eyes, letting the rhythmic swaying of the ship soothe the fever of greed that has infected the deck. In the dark, the gold doesn't shine. In the dark, we are all just men, drifting on a piece of wood, waiting for the dawn to tell us where we are going. The air in the Caribbean does not always bring the scent of salt and freedom. Sometimes it carries a heavy, invisible weight that settles in the marrow of your bones. It begins as a dull ache behind your eyes, a rhythmic thumping that matches the slow, sluggish roll of the ship in a dead calm. The sun is no longer a guide, but a white-hot eye, staring down at the deck with a predatory intensity. You find yourself leaning against the mast, your skin shivering despite the sweltering humidity. This is the Yellow Jack, the silent passenger that slips aboard without a boarding pike and claims more men than all the cannons of the Royal Navy. You are moved down to the orlop deck, away from the blinding glare of the main deck, but the darkness offers no sanctuary. The air down here is stagnant, a thick soup of recycled breath and the metallic tang of old blood. You lie on a thin, damp mat, the wood beneath you vibrating with the deep, rhythmic groan of the hull. Your reality begins to fray at the edges. The sounds of the ship, the creak of the timbers, the scurrying of rats, the distant murmur of the crew transform into a distorted, haunting symphony. The rhythmic splashing of the bilge water starts to sound like voices calling your name from a shore you left behind years ago. The fever brings a terrifying clarity to your memories. You see the faces of people you haven't thought of in a lifetime, their features sharp and vivid against the blackened oak of the ceiling. You are back in the green fields of England, feeling the cool, rhythmic touch of a spring rain on your face, only to wake with a jolt to find the rain is merely the sweat pouring off your own brow, stinging your eyes. Your thirst is a living thing, a dry, jagged stone lodged in your throat. Every time the ship lurches, a wave of nausea washes over you, a rhythmic cycle of physical misery that strips away your pride until you are nothing but a shivering animal. Gristle, the ship's grim healer, moves through the darkness like a shadow. He doesn't offer comfort, only a rhythmic, forced ritual of survival. He presses a lukewarm cloth soaked in vinegar to your forehead and forces a bitter, herbal concoction down your throat. It tastes of dirt and ash, but you swallow it with a desperate rhythmic gulping, clinging to anything that might anchor you to the world of the living. You watch him move to the man next to you, a strong sailor who only yesterday was holding the mainsail, now reduced to a hollow-eyed ghost, muttering in a language no one understands. The passage of time becomes a rhythmic blur. Day turns to night only by the changing temperature of the air and the shifting patterns of the lantern light. You listen to the heartbeat of the ship, the slow, rhythmic thud-thud of the waves against the side, and you realize how fragile this wooden world truly is. When you are strong, the ship is a fortress. When you are weak, it is a coffin. You feel the immense pressure of the ocean outside, a vast, indifferent weight that waits for the moment your own internal fire finally flickers out. There are moments of deep, terrifying silence when the wind dies completely, and the ship sits motionless in a sea of glass. In these moments, the fever takes you deeper into the abyss. You feel your soul drifting away from your body, floating up through the decks, through the rigging, and into the infinite black of the tropical night. You are no longer a pirate, no longer a man. You are just a vibration in the air, a rhythmic pulse in the great, dark lung of the Atlantic. But then, a change occurs. The air shifts. A cool, rhythmic breeze finds its way down the hatch, carrying the scent of rain and distant land. You feel the ship heel as it catches the wind, the timber singing a different, more hopeful tune. Your fever breaks in a sudden violent torrent of sweat, leaving you cold, hollowed out, but clear-headed. You breathe in the new air, a long, rhythmic draw that feels like the first breath you have ever taken. You are weak, your muscles feeling like wet string, but you are still here. You look around the dim hold at the men who didn't make it, their still forms being prepared for the final rhythmic slide into the deep. You have survived the storm within your own blood. You pull yourself up, your hands shaking as they grip the ladder, and you begin the long rhythmic climb back toward the light. The sea is waiting, and for today, it has decided to let you keep your life. The horizon is no longer your playground. It has become a jagged line of judgment. The warning comes not as a shout, but as a low, rhythmic vibration that travels through the water and into the very bones of the Antelope. You stand at the stern rail, watching a speck of white canvas grow into a towering mountain of colonial power. This is a ship of the line, a Leviathan of the Royal Navy, its triple decks bristling with 64 cannons that could turn your world into toothpicks with a single, synchronized roar. The chase is not a sprint. It is a slow, agonizing game of geometry played across a desert of blue glass. The atmosphere on the deck is thick, with a cold, professional dread. Every man knows the stakes. For the Navy, this is a chore of empire. For you, it is a race against the gallows. You find yourself moving in a rhythmic, desperate trance, obeying orders that are whispered rather than shouted. The captain stands by the binnacle, his eyes fixed on the trim of the sails, his mind calculating the exact angle of the wind. We are running light, but the Goliath behind us has the reach of the gods. You feel the ship strain as more canvas is crowded onto the yards, the timber groaning in a high-pitched rhythmic protest that vibrates in the soles of your feet. To gain speed, the ship must be purged. You join the line of men hauling heavy rhythmic loads from the hatch. First go the spare anchors, splashing into the deep with a hollow final thud. Then go the captured crates of sugar and spice, the wealth you bled for only days ago, now dissolving into the salt. Finally, the order comes for the extra water casks. You watch the precious liquid pour over the side, a rhythmic, shimmering stream that leaves you parched just looking at it. The ship rises in the water, becoming leaner, hungrier, but the shadow behind you does not falter. It follows your wake with a rhythmic, mechanical persistence that feels like the ticking of a clock. The sun beats down, turning the deck into a furnace. You are stationed at the braces, your muscles locked in a rhythmic tension, waiting for the slightest shift in the breeze. Every few minutes, a puff of white smoke blooms from the bow of the pursuer. A long, agonizing silence follows, and then the rhythmic whistle of a heavy iron ball cutting through the air. It splashes hundreds of yards short, sending up a fountain of spray that catches the light like diamonds. They are finding the range. They are measuring the distance of your life in cable lengths. You look at the men around you. Elias is calm, his eyes tracking the fall of the shot with a rhythmic, detached interest. Rhodey is grim, his massive hands gripping a boarding axe so tight his knuckles are white. There is no talk of gold now, only the rhythmic sound of breathing and the slap of the waves against the hull. You realize that the Navy doesn't just want the ship, They want the silence that follows your execution. They represent the world of maps, of clocks, and of hanging docks, a world that has no room for the rhythmic, chaotic freedom you have chosen. Night begins to fall, a bruised purple shadow creeping over the ocean. This is your only ally. The order is given to douse every spark, every pipe, every lantern. The Antelope becomes a ghost, a black splinter sliding through a black sea. You sit in the absolute darkness. The only sound, the rhythmic heartbeat of the ocean against the wood. You can still see the silhouette of the hunter behind you, a darker patch against the stars, relentless and cold. The wind shifts. It is a subtle rhythmic caress against your cheek, but the captain feels it instantly. The helm is thrown over, and the ship jibes with a violent rhythmic creak of the boom. You are running into the teeth of a coming squall, choosing the danger of the storm over the certainty of the noose. The hunter fades into the mist, their lanterns flickering like dying stars as the distance finally begins to open. You lean your forehead against the cool, damp wood of the railing, your breath coming in slow, rhythmic shudders. The chase has lasted 14 hours, and every second felt like a year. You are exhausted, your soul scoured clean by the friction of fear. The Navy is still out there, a rhythmic lurking presence in the vastness of the Atlantic, but for this night, the shadows have kept their own. You sink onto the deck, the rhythmic swaying of the ship finally feeling like a cradle again, carrying you away from the giants and back into the lawless, beautiful dark. The world of the ship is a world of constant motion, of creaking timber and shouting men, but the desert island is a world of absolute, terrifying stillness. You find yourself standing on a crescent of white sand that feels like powdered bone under your bare feet. The Antelope sits anchored in the lagoon, a dark splinter against the neon turquoise of the water, its masts swaying in a slow, rhythmic dance that seems alien to this stationary land. You have been sent ashore with a small party to scavenge for fresh water and turtle eggs, but as the hours stretch on, the island begins to feel less like a resource and more like a mirror. The heat here is a solid, rhythmic presence, vibrating off the salt-bleached limestone. You move into the interior, the jungle, a dense, emerald wall that breathes with a heavy, humid intensity. There are no cannons here, no Royal Navy pursuers, and no pirate code. There is only the rhythmic hum of insects and the distant hollow cry of a bird you cannot see. The silence is so deep that you can hear the rush of blood in your own ears, a rhythmic pulse that reminds you of your own fragile life. You realize that, without the ship, you are nothing but a ghost haunting a garden of sand. You find a freshwater spring, a thin silver thread of water trickling into a stone basin. You kneel and drink, the water cool and sweet, a rhythmic contrast to the stagnant green sludge of the ship's casks. You stay there for a moment, watching your reflection in the pool. The man staring back is a stranger. His skin and his leather tough, his eyes are hard and weary, and his hands are stained with a permanent black of tar. You wonder if the person you used to be, the one who slept in a house and walked on paved streets, ever truly existed. The island doesn't offer an answer. It only offers the rhythmic drip of water against stone. As you walk back toward the shore, you find the wreckage of a long dead vessel, its ribs protruding from the sand like the carcass of a whale. It is a reminder that the sea eventually claims everything. You sit in the shadow of the rotted wood, watching the rhythmic swell of the tide. The ocean looks different from the shore. From the deck, it is a road, a battlefield, and a grave. From the sand, it is an infinite, rhythmic lung, breathing in and out with a patience that spans centuries. You feel a strange, hollow longing to stay here, to let the jungle swallow your name and the sand bury your crimes. But the boatswain's whistle drifts across the water, a sharp, rhythmic intrusion that breaks the spell. The ship is calling you back. The Antelope is your only home, a wooden cage that keeps you from being consumed by the silence of the world. You gather your sacks of fruit and your jugs of water, your boots making a rhythmic crunching sound as you cross the beach. You look back one last time at the untouched interior of the island, a place where time has no meaning and the king has no power. You row back to the ship, the rhythmic dip of the oars creating silver ripples on the glass-like surface of the lagoon. As you climb the ladder and feel the familiar swaying deck beneath you, the noise of the crew feels overwhelming. The swearing, the clanking of chains, and the smell of old rum rush back to meet you. You realize that the desert island was a glimpse into a different kind of death, a quiet, forgotten end. You would rather die in the fire of a broadside or the fury of a storm than be swallowed by that perfect, rhythmic silence. The anchor is hauled up, the rhythmic clink of the capstan signaling your departure. The sails catch the wind, and the island begins to shrink into a green smudge on the horizon. You return to your post, the rhythmic pull of the lines feeling honest and real. The island is gone, but the silence you found there stays with you, a small, cold seed buried deep in your heart. You are a man of the sea again, drifting toward the next shadow, the next fight, and the next sunrise. The storm of the sea is a physical thing, but there is a second storm that brews in the dead of night, when the cannons are cold and the crew is a chorus of heavy, rhythmic breathing in the dark. It is the trial of the mind. You lie on the floor of the hold, the oak planks pressing against your spine like the cold stones of a prison cell. The ship is becalmed, sitting in a vast glassy void where the water doesn't even ripple against the hull. In this absolute stillness, the distractions of survival fall away, leaving you alone with the ghost of the man you used to be. You see him clearly in the shadows of the overhead beams. He is a younger version of yourself, standing on a sun-drenched pier, his clothes clean and his eyes bright with a naive rhythmic hope. He believed in the law. He believed in the goodness of the crown. He believed that if a man worked hard and kept his head down, the world would treat him with a measured, rhythmic fairness. You want to reach out to him, to warn him of the shadow on the horizon and the taste of the salt-cured leather between his teeth. But he is a stranger now, a relic from a drowned world. The trial begins with the faces of the prizes you have taken. You see the merchant captain from the Antelope, his hands shaking as he surrendered his logbook. You see the terrified eyes of the cabin boy on the Spanish galleon, a child who looked at you not as a hero or a rebel, but as a monster birthed by the black mists. The gold in your sea chest feels like a heavy, rhythmic anchor, pulling your spirit down into the silt. You try to justify it. You tell yourself that the world broke you first, that the king's navy stole your youth, and that the hunger left you no choice. But in the rhythmic silence of the becalmed sea, the excuses sound thin and hollow, like the rattle of dry bones in a box. You are the judge, the jury, and the condemned. You weigh the freedom of the black flag against the cost of the blood on the deck. Is it truly freedom if it requires the suffering of others? Or is it just a different kind of tyranny, one governed by the edge of a cutlass rather than the seal of a magistrate? You feel the rhythmic throb of your old wounds, the sear of the iron, the ache of the scurvy, the sting of the lash. They are the evidence of your struggle, the scars of a man who refused to be a slave. But as the night deepens, you realize that you have merely traded one master for another. You are a slave to the ship, a slave to the hunt, and a slave to the endless, rhythmic horizon. The darkness of the hold seems to expand, swallowing the walls until you are floating in a void. You hear the rhythmic ticking of a watch that isn't there, a countdown to a judgment that has no court. You think of the gallows at Hope Point, the way the wind whistles through the chains of the gibbets, a rhythmic, metallic song of warning to all who sail. You wonder if your name is already written on a warrant, a smudge of ink on a desk in a London office, a life reduced to a rhythmic stroke of a bureaucrat's pen. You turn on your side, your face pressed against the rough, salt-crusted wood. You can smell the bilge, the rot, and the ancient, rhythmic scent of the sea. You realize that there is no verdict to be reached, only a path to be walked. The sea does not judge, it only consumes. It takes the saint and the sinner with the same rhythmic indifference. Your trial will never end because your crime is simply being alive in a world that has no place for you. A faint, rhythmic creak comes from the deck above. The wind is returning. You feel the ship shiver, a subtle rhythmic awakening as the sails begin to fill with the cool night air. The trial is adjourned, pushed back into the recesses of your mind by the immediate demands of the helm and the rope. You stand up, your joints cracking in the quiet, and you begin the rhythmic climb toward the deck. The moon is a pale silver sliver above the mast, casting a cold light over the water. You take your place at the rail, watching the wake of the ship cut through the black mirror of the ocean. You are still a pirate. You are still a ghost. But as the ship gathers speed, moving with a rhythmic, purposeful grace, you realize that the only way to survive the trial is to keep moving. The past is a weight, but the wind is a promise. You breathe in the salt, a long rhythmic draw that clears the fog from your mind, and you prepare yourself for the next dawn. The judge is silent. The sea is wide. And for now, that is enough. The final trap does not spring in the open ocean, but in the suffocating embrace of a narrow mangrove-choked channel. The Royal Navy has not forgotten the chase. They have merely been waiting for the Antelope to grow heavy with gold and slow with arrogance. You find yourself trapped between a jagged reef and a line of 3 British frigates, their white sails gleaming like the teeth of a rising shark. The air is thick with the scent of stagnant mud and the rhythmic thumping of drums from the enemy decks. This is not a battle for a prize. It is an execution in the shallow water, and the only way out is a path that no sane sailor would ever take. The captain's eyes are no longer on the horizon. They are fixed on the swirling muddy eddies of the tide. He calls for the kedge anchors, and you find yourself in the longboat, your muscles screaming in a rhythmic, agonizing protest as you row into the teeth of the current. You are dragging the entire weight of the ship by hand, dropping anchors and holding on the lines to winch the hull through the silt. It is a slow, rhythmic torture, every inch of progress bought with the sweat of 100 men. Behind you, the first frigate rounds the headland, its bow chases spitting orange fire that skips across the water with a rhythmic, deadly splashing. You scramble back onto the deck just as the grapeshot begins to shred the rigging. The sound is a rhythmic, metallic rain, tearing through the silk and the hemp, showering the crew in a storm of splinters and iron. There is no time to aim, no time to think. You are a cog in a frantic, rhythmic machine, hauling on the braces to swing the ship into the narrowest part of the channel. The hull scrapes against the coral with a rhythmic, bone-shaking roar that feels like it is tearing the very heart out of the oak. You feel the ship shudder, a sudden sickening halt as the keel bites into the sand. For a moment, the world goes silent. The rhythmic lapping of the water against the hull is the only sound in the vacuum of terror. The frigates are closing in, their gun ports swinging open in a slow rhythmic sequence that reveals the black iron muzzles within. They are preparing a full broadside, a rhythmic delivery of death that will erase the Antelope from the map. Tot. You look at Elias, who is calmly lighting a slow match, and at Brody, who is bracing himself against the mast. They are not waiting for a miracle. They are waiting for the wind. And then it comes, a sudden, rhythmic gust that smells of the deep swamp and the coming rain. It hits the topsails with a crack like a pistol shot. The ship heels over, the masts groaning in a rhythmic, desperate shriek, and the keel slides free from the mud with a wet, sucking sound. You are moving. You are flying through a gap in the reef that is no wider than the ship itself. The jagged coral clawing at the hull just inches from the copper sheathing. The frigates fire. A rhythmic, earth-shaking thunder that turns the air into a wall of gray smoke, but the shots fly high, screaming through the empty space where you stood only seconds before. You are through. You hit the open water with a rhythmic, surging plunge, the Antelope shaking itself like a wet dog. The frigates are left behind, trapped by their own deep draughts and the shifting sands of the channel. You watch them shrink into the mist, their proud flags looking small and helpless against the vastness of the Atlantic. You have escaped a noose once again, but the cost is etched into every plank of the ship. The deck is a ruin of tangled rope and shattered wood, and the rhythmic sound of the pumps tells you that the sea is still trying to find its way in. You collapse against the railing, your breath coming in ragged, rhythmic gasps that hurt your lungs. Your hands are shredded, your spirit is frayed, and the gold in the hold feels like a mockery of the life you almost lost. You look out at the black water, the rhythmic swell of the ocean returning to its steady, indifferent pulse. You realize that the Great Escape isn't just about outrunning the Navy, it is about outrunning the inevitable. You are a ghost that's refused to be laid to rest, a shadow that has slipped through the fingers of the law. As the moon rises, casting a cold silver light over the battered ship, you feel a strange hollow sense of victory. You are still alive. You are still free. But as you listen to the rhythmic creaking of the damaged masts, you know that the hunt will never truly end. The sea is a wide place, but the world is getting smaller every day. You close your eyes, letting the rhythmic motion of the waves soothe your exhaustion, and you prepare yourself for the long, slow repair of your soul. The shadow has survived, but the light is always watching. The time comes not with a final battle or a dramatic sinking, but without a quiet, rhythmic realization that the salt has eaten enough of your soul. You stand on the deck of the Antelope as she sits in a hidden emerald cove, far from the shipping lanes and the prying eyes of the frigates. The ship is tired. Her timbers are weeping, her masts are scarred with the lightning of a dozen storms, and her spirit feels as heavy as the barnacles encrusting her hull. You look at your hands, the skin permanently stained by tar and gunpowder, and you realize that the rhythmic life of a predator has become a weight you can no longer carry. The decision to leave is a silent one, shared by a handful of men who have survived the fever, the iron, and the hunger. There is no mutiny, no shouting. There is only the rhythmic clinking of personal belongings, being packed into small canvas bags. You take nothing from the heavy chests of gold. That wealth belongs to the ship and the men who still have the fire of the hunt in their bellies. You take only a small pouch of silver, a rusted knife, and a compass that has lost its true north. As you prepare to climb into the small rowing boat, you run your hand over the railing one last time, feeling the rhythmic vibration of the waves against the wood. This ship was your prison, your fortress, and your home, and leaving her feels like tearing a limb from your own body. You row away in the pre-dawn gray, the rhythmic dip and splash of the oars, the only sound in the sheltered lagoon. Behind you, the Antelope looms like a prehistoric beast, a skeletal silhouette against the fading stars. You see the glowing embers of the watchfire on her deck, a small rhythmic pulsing of light that marks the life you are abandoning. You are shedding your skin, leaving the ghost of the pirate behind in the salt spray. The ocean, which once felt like a wide road of infinite possibility, now looks like a vast, indifferent graveyard. You feel a rhythmic ache in your chest, a mixture of grief and a terrifying hollow relief. The shore is a world of green shadows and solid, unmoving earth. As the keel of your boat bites into the sand, the rhythmic grinding of the pebbles sounds like a long-delayed homecoming. You step out, your legs feeling heavy and clumsy, unaccustomed to a ground that doesn't tilt and heave. You look back at the horizon, where the first light of the sun is turning the water into a sheet of hammered gold. The sea is beautiful, a rhythmic masterpiece of light and motion, but it is no longer yours. You have paid your debt in blood and sweat, and the Atlantic has finally released its grip on your heart. You walk toward the tree line, your boots making a rhythmic crunching sound that feels strange and loud in the quiet of the morning. You don't look back. You know that if you do, the sight of the sails catching the wind will pull you back into the cycle of the hunt. You are choosing a different kind of silence, not the silence of the desert island or the silence of the hold, but the silence of a man who has finally stopped running. The rhythmic roar of the surf begins to fade behind the rustle of the leaves and the song of the land birds. You find a narrow trail, an old path worn by feet that never knew the deck of a ship. It leads away from the salt, away from the gallows, and away from the black flag. You feel the weight of the silver in your pocket, a rhythmic reminder of the price of your survival. You are a nameless man now, a wanderer with a past that must be buried in a shallow grave. The sea will continue its rhythmic eternal pulse without you, indifferent to your absence as it was indifferent to your presence. As you reach the crest of a hill and the ocean finally vanishes from view, you stop to breathe. The air here smells of damp earth, crushed grass, and blooming jasmine, a rhythmic, sweet perfume that makes your head swim. You are no longer a pirate. You are no longer a cog in the machine of empire. You are just a man standing on the earth, feeling the rhythmic thud of a heart that survived when so many others stopped. The farewell is complete. The sea is a memory. The land is a promise. And as you turn your face toward the interior, you begin the slow, rhythmic walk into the rest of your life. The world no longer tilts. For the first time in a decade, the floor beneath your feet is as silent and unmoving as the ancient stone of the mountains. You have built a small, sturdy hut on a secluded stretch of coastline, tucked behind a ridge of salt-stiffened pines that buffer the relentless Atlantic wind. It is a humble structure of weathered cedar and sun-bleached thatch, smelling of dry grass and the wood smoke from your small rhythmic hearth. Here, the only master you answer to is the rising sun and the seasonal migration of the birds. You have traded the cold iron of the cutlass for the rough wooden handle of a hoe, and the rhythmic digging into the dark, fragrant earth has become your new meditation. You sit on a low bench outside your door as the afternoon light turns the world into a wash of pale amber. Your joints still ache when the weather turns damp, a rhythmic reminder of the nights spent in the freezing bilge of the Antelope. But the pain is distant now, a dull echo of a war that has finally ended. You watch the rhythmic swaying of your small garden patches of hardy greens and sweet potatoes struggling against the sandy soil. There is a profound, heavy peace in watching something grow rather than watching something bleed. You find yourself talking to the plants, a low, rhythmic murmur that replaces the shouting of orders and the frantic cries of the chase. Occasionally you walk down to the high tide line, your boots making a rhythmic, crunching sound on the dried seaweed and broken shells. You look out at the horizon, where the sea meets the sky in a perfect, indifferent line of blue. You can still read the weather in the clouds. You still feel the rhythmic shift in the wind that tells you a squall is brewing 50 miles out. But you no longer reach for a rope or scan for a sail. You are a spectator now, a ghost watching the living world from the safety of the shore. You see a distant white speck on the water, a merchantman, or perhaps a hunter, and you feel a rhythmic throb of sympathy for the men on her deck, trapped in the gears of a machine they do not understand. Your hands, once black with tar and red with the hunt, are now stained with the honest grime of the land. You spend your evenings carving small figures from driftwood birds, fish, and the skeletal ribs of ships you once knew. The rhythmic shaving of the wood is the only sound in the hut, a steady, soothing pulse that keeps the silence from becoming too heavy. You don't think of the gold buried under your floorboards. It is just metal, a rhythmic weight that has lost its power to tempt you. You think instead of the men who didn't make it to this shore, Elias, Brody, and the nameless boys who vanished into the white foam. You are their witness, the keeper of their rhythmic, forgotten stories. The nights are the quietest. Without the groaning of the hull and the rhythmic slapping of the waves, The silence of the land feels immense, almost physical. You lie in your bed of dried ferns, listening to the rhythmic chirping of the crickets and the distant muffled roar of the surf. The sea is still there, a great dark lung breathing just over the ridge, but it can no longer reach you. You are anchored in the soil, rooted in the stillness of the earth. You feel the rhythmic thud of your heart, slow and steady, matching the pace of a world that doesn't need to be conquered. Sometimes, in the transition between waking and sleep, you feel the hut begin to sway. For a fleeting second, you are back in the hold, the smell of salt and old rum filling your nostrils, the rhythmic creak of the masts singing in your ears. But then you feel the solid, unmoving weight of the stone hearth and the scent of the pine needles through the window. You settle back into the mattress, a rhythmic sigh escaping your lips. You have found the one thing the black flag could never provide, a place to be still. The hunt is over. The debt is paid. And as the moon climbs over the trees, casting long silver shadows across your small, quiet kingdom, you drift into a dreamless sleep, carried not by the tide, but by the deep, rhythmic peace of the land. The candle on your small wooden table flickers one last time, its flame a tiny, rhythmic heartbeat that finally surrenders to the darkness. You sit in your chair, the high back carved from the ribs of a forgotten wreck, feeling the weight of your years settling into your bones like silt on the ocean floor. Outside the hut, the Atlantic is performing its ancient, rhythmic ritual, the waves washing over the pebbles with a sound like the exhaling of a great, weary god. You do not reach for the flint to relight the wick. You find that you no longer need the light to see where you are going. The darkness is not a void. It is a familiar, velvet companion that has followed you from the orlop deck to this quiet shore. You close your eyes, and the walls of the hut begin to dissolve. The scent of dry pine and wood smoke fades, replaced by the sharp, crystalline tang of ozone and the deep metallic aroma of the deep blue. The rhythmic creaking of the cedar planks transforms into the majestic, straining song of a ship under full sail. You feel the floor beneath you begin to tilt, a slow, hypnotic swaying that pulls the tension from your muscles and the ache from your joints. You are back on the quarterdeck, not as a captive or a predator, but as a part of the wind itself. The black flag is gone. The red ensign is gone. There are no colors left to strike, and no kings left to defy. You see them now, standing along the spectral railing of a ship made of moonlight and memory. Elias is there, his hands steady on us, ghostly tiller, his eyes fixed on a star that never sets. Brody is laughing, a silent rhythmic vibration that shakes the rigging, his massive shoulders relaxed at last. They are not scarred or broken, they are whole, their spirits scoured clean by the salt and the years. They beckon to you, their movements a rhythmic invitation to join the final watch. You realize that the ship you are boarding is the one you have been building your entire life, one plank of suffering, one nail of courage, and 1,000 leagues of longing. The rhythmic pulse of the ocean becomes the only sound in the universe. It is a deep, resonant thrumming that vibrates in the marrow of your spirit, a lullaby for a man who has forgotten how to rest. You feel the ship gather speed, cutting through a sea of liquid silver that leaves no wake and feels no storm. The horizon, which was once a jagged line of fear and gold, is now an endless, glowing threshold. You are drifting toward the place where the maps end and the stories begin, a realm where the tide never ebbs and the sun never burns. Your breath becomes slow and rhythmic, matching the rise and fall of the phantom deck. You feel the heavy burden of your name, your crimes, and your survival slipping away, falling into the dark water like discarded ballast. You are light. You are hollowed out and filled with the cool, rhythmic air of the high latitudes. The memories of the iron, the fever, and the hunt fade into a soft, grey mist, leaving only the purity of the motion. You are no longer the man in the hut. You are the spray on the bow, the hum in the shrouds, and the glint of the moon on the swell. The rhythmic swaying becomes gentler, a slow, cradling movement that lulls your consciousness into a state of perfect, crystalline peace. The world of the land, the soil, the trees, and the small, quiet hut is a dream you once had, a brief interruption in an eternal voyage. You lean back into the darkness, letting the current take the helm. There is no more work to be done. The lines are coiled, the anchors are stowed, and the watch is relieved. As the final flicker of the world fades, you feel a sudden, rhythmic surge of joy. You are finally sailing home, to a home that has no shore and no ending. The sea has reclaimed its own. You drift out past the last reef, past the last star, and into the infinite, rhythmic embrace of the horizon. The silence is absolute. The peace is total. And the voyage, at last, is beginning.